Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Amanda Rossi, and I'm the Director of Business Development Operations at MyTax. It's my pleasure to host today's webinar about our MyTax Accelerate Defense and Security Call for Proposals, delivered in collaboration with Canada's Department of National Defence. As we begin today's session, we would like to acknowledge that the land from which this webinar is hosted is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk Nation. Johaket, Montreal, has long been a gathering place from many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We recognize and respect the enduring presence, cultures, and contributions of Indigenous peoples who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. As we come together to discuss defense, security, and innovation, we encourage participants to reflect on Indigenous territories from which they are joining and on the importance of advancing our work with respect, responsibility, and a commitment to reconciliation. I'll quickly run through the agenda for our time together. Firstly, Derek Newton, our Senior VP of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships, will give opening remarks. Next, Wendy Hepburn, Deputy Director of the Defense Industrial Strategy, will provide an overview of Canada's Defense Industrial Strategy, following which we'll host a moderated panel discussion with invited guests. And thereafter, Simon Bousquet, VP of Business Development at MyTax, will present the details of our call for proposals in defense and security. To close off the webinar, we'll host a Q&A session. Two very quick housekeeping notes here. Firstly, we invite you to submit your questions through the duration of the session using the Q&A feature in Teams. And secondly, the Q&A will be exclusively reserved to address questions regarding the call for proposals itself. So without further delay, I'll pass the mic to Derek Newton, our Senior VP, Business Development and Strategic Partnerships. Derek, over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada. This is an exciting day for us as we've launched a new competition and we have a packed 60 minutes. So we're going to jump right in. I'm Derek Newton, Senior Vice President, Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at MyTax. Next slide. So MyTax, for 25 years, has helped to grow the Canadian economy, develop the workforce of tomorrow by connecting industry with academia and global partners to solve real-world challenges. And solving real-world challenges is absolutely the topic of today. Next slide, please. So MyTax, we have a vision, and this is articulated in our new strategic plan, which I'll say a few comments about, of a strong, resilient Canadian economy powered by ideas, talent, and innovation with a mission to drive industry academic collaborations. We've got an amazing panel that's going to talk a little bit about those industry academic collaborations, putting skills and talent right in the middle of that as we build innovation capacity to strengthen Canada's productivity and global competitiveness. Next slide, please. We can put in the chat a link to our new strategic plan, which contains 5 key elements. And this was developed and launched late last year, talking about how MyTax is going to support Canadian productivity, business growth and competitiveness, talent development, long-term economic prosperity. In the call for proposals that we're talking about today, you can see the 5 key pillars of our strategic plan. And today, I hope you'll see how we're going to be touching on every single one of those 5 areas. We'll go to the next slide. Today is a very forward-looking conversation about a new program that we're launching, but I think it's important to reflect on the contribution that MyTax has had on the Canadian economy and our impact to date. Almost $1.7 billion of investment in R&D has been unlocked through MyTax programs across the country. Over 40,000 innovation projects have been supported and over 100,000 internships across the country. We've worked with over 160 post-secondary institutions, coast to coast to coast, and an enormous number of enterprise partners, some of which are here with us today. And important to note that 86% of the partners that we work with are small, medium enterprises, Canadian companies that have less than 500 employees, which are using MyTax programs to grow and succeed. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about the impacts and what we've seen to date. MyTax collaborated and worked with StatsCan to take a review of our programs and some of the impacts and work with partners. If we start on the left-hand side of this slide, within a rounding error, you can see that almost 100% of interns who have experienced our programs would recommend this to others, and they've reported higher technical skills. Perhaps more importantly, 70% of these interns go on to R&D roles in Canada in their field and go on to successful high-paying jobs. And almost 1 in 5, 16%, go on to found their own company. If we go to the right-hand side of this slide, when it comes to the institutions, academic partners, again, unbelievable engagement when it comes to the benefits that supervisors and academic institutions have seen. But perhaps really, and what's critical for today's discussion is right in the middle of this chart, which is say, what has the impact of MyTax programs been to Canadian companies? They have reported increases in productivity, increases in revenue, increases in sales, and then as they continue to invest in R&D and receive the benefits, what we can see is that these companies go on to continue to invest in Canada and grow and support their businesses. We'll go to the next slide. So what do we know and what do we know works? Really, the MyTax program has a number of key partnerships, key programs that we launch. Accelerate, these are co-funded internship programs that connect industry with university colleges to solve real-world academic challenges. The Accelerate program is really the key piece of the call for proposals that we're going to talk about today. We also have a business strategy program where companies across the country are using the business strategy program to imagine new business lines. They've been affected by tariffs. They want to adopt new technologies. They want to bring in individuals who can help them enter into a new market space or launch a new product line. Could be a dual use product line. So we've seen many companies accessing this program. And Global Link is programs to provide two-way mobility when it comes to bringing in incredible talent from around the world to Canada to tackle and work with companies and challenges here in Canada, and also to provide our students here with international experiences. So let's talk a little bit about today and the moment we're in, which is navigating an era of profound geopolitical upheaval, competition over resources, Arctic security, and the merging of economic defense priorities have made sovereignty a national imperative. And so MyTax is delighted to launch this call that we're talking about today. As you've seen, for 25 years, we are a pan-Canadian delivery platform with a number of business development folks located across the country who are here to help meet this moment, to help Canadian companies work with institutions across the country. And we've got an amazing new partnership with the Department of Defense, and delighted to be welcoming them here today to talk about DISH and these priorities. But before we jump into that, we should talk a little bit about, next slide, please, that MyTax already works with many of the defense partners that are located across the country. Here's some of the partners that we've already been engaged with and are working with, and we're eager to take this to the next level, responsive to new priorities with the Department of Defense. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Wendy Hepburn from the Department of Defense to talk a little bit about Canada's defense industrial strategy. And Wendy, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today and to speak about Canada's defense industrial strategy and the importance really of strengthening the talent pipeline. And I'd like to thank Dr. Lucas and Derek Newton here at MyTax in particular for convening us today. So we could go on to the next slide just after that. I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about the challenges we're facing. And as Derek just alluded to, as we've seen in the recent months, the global security environment is deteriorating and geography no longer guarantees Canada's security. Sovereignty today looks different than it once did, and it is not only defended on land, sea, and air, it is also contested in cyberspace, in energy grids, in digital networks, in the flow of capital, and in information. And as a result, our allies are rearming and our global demand for critical capabilities is accelerating. Over the last year or so, we engaged with governments across the country, with key stakeholders and thousands of industry and post-secondary representatives, and we looked at what our allies have been doing. And the message to us was clear. decades of underinvestment, a transaction-based relationship with industry, unclear capability requirements, and cumbersome procurement processes have taken their toll on Canada's defense industry. And these problems have made us less competitive and opened us up to economic and security vulnerabilities. The system we have has not been able to equip the Canadian Armed Forces at speed to support our allies reliably or capture global opportunities. And in face of these geopolitical threats, Canada needs a modern defense infrastructure and equipment to defend its sovereignty. We could go on to the next slide. Just a few months ago, the Prime Minister released Canada's first defense industrial strategy, and you may have heard about some of our investments in space launch that recently happened and some news coverage of this past week. The strategy details a clear vision of how to enhance our country's security, sovereignty, and prosperity, with a view to giving the Canadian Armed Forces the capabilities they need to defend the country, protect our sovereignty, and counter current and future threats. And importantly, the strategy provides the signal to industry, to allies, and to other partners that we are moving forward with coherence and with purpose, with a view to gaining greater strategic autonomy and reducing our vulnerabilities to international pressures and threats, while building a flourishing economy for all Canadians. And the inclusive part there is important. I wanted to rest on slide 3 for just a second. The foundation for innovation. The key focus of the Defence Industrial Strategy is to accelerate the adoption of Canadian defence and dual-use innovation, and to turn that into a strategic advantage for the Canadian Armed Forces. Similarly, we want to build up the talent and the skills required for this type of innovation, as well as other important work across the Canadian defence industrial base. This involves not only programming, but mechanisms to help bridge the gap between what the Canadian Armed Forces need and what industry and post-secondary institutions can provide. And critically, as we roll out the strategy, developing our sovereign capabilities will be a top priority. And you'll see them on the bottom left of that slide right there. Aerospace, specialized manufacturing, personnel protection, so medical countermeasures, digital systems, sensors, space, etc. Sovereign capabilities are priority investment areas for which the government aims to maximize secure, strategic autonomy and reduce supply chain vulnerabilities. These 10 capability areas play to our strengths, and they advance our ambitions, ranging from manufacturing to digital and autonomous systems. The call for proposals with MyTax in support of defense and security, and notably in support of sovereign capabilities in other important areas, will help strengthen the defense industry talent pipeline, forge new industry post-secondary partnerships, and ensure that Canadian organizations have access to the talent they need. We will also work with MyTax to ensure the proposals contribute to the needs of the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence. And this is what I see as critical. It's critical to ensure that Canada has the essential science and technical leadership to enhance our defence posture and grow our economy. The Defence Industrial Strategy is a transformational agenda for the next decade, and one that really will deliver a range of benefits to Canada's armed forces. But it is also about growing the Canadian economy by creating high-quality jobs, sourcing our sovereign capabilities from world-class firms right here in Canada, and generating demand for our exports, growing our defense industry with a specific focus on small and medium-sized businesses. And that is how we will mobilize the best that Canada has to offer. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that overview. And now we're going to move into a panel conversation. So it is my pleasure to welcome a wonderful panel consisting of, next slide, consisting of Professor Vice President Amina Robinson from the University of Alberta. We have Sean Roy, Senior Director, Corporate Development, MDA Space. Chad English, Senior Director, Government Programs, Reaction Dynamics. And of course, Wendy Hadwin, who we just heard from, Deputy Director, Defense Industrial Strategy, Department of National Defense. I'm going to let each of the panelists have the opportunity to introduce themselves, and I'm going to have them each answer this question, which is: Canada has made defense and security a clear priority. What are some of the most immediate capability gaps that research partnerships can help address? We're going to start with Amina, and then we'll go to Sean, Chad, and then Wendy. Amina, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation today. This is such a priority for many of us, including at the University of Alberta. So in response to the first question, I believe that one of the most immediate gaps is our need to create integrated ecosystems that will help us accelerate the transition of research into real-world defense and security applications. Universities have the opportunity to act as these strategic integrators, connecting industry partners, government, and the Canadian Armed Forces to drive applied research. By aligning industry and Canadian Armed Forces needs with specialized academic expertise and facilities, we can advance co-developed projects that strengthen Canada's sovereign defense capabilities. In turn, the participating partners can develop new capacity to test and scale their innovations in secure research environments with cutting-edge equipment and tools, and staff, students, and faculty members who are well-versed in research security and have decades of experience in defense and dual-use technology development. These partnerships also support development of highly qualified personnel needed to support Canada's expanding defense industrial base. Through these ecosystems and partnerships, students develop skills and hands-on experience directly within secure real-world defense contexts. These students are then fully trained upon graduation to serve the needs of the Canadian Armed Forces, industry, and government, and they're often hired by these organizations. They bring with them their expertise and the innovations they develop during their time as a student. MyTax has effectively achieved this objective through its programs, and particularly this Defense and Security Accelerate call in association with the Department of National Defense. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your insights, Amina. That's wonderful. Sean, over to you.
Sure. So Sean Roy, Senior Director of Corporate Development. Apologies for not having a headshot, but I gave a little extra advertising for MDA Space. Yeah, so in terms of the assessment of capability gaps in Canada, I would say that we actually don't know. I don't know that I can speak to any one individual organization that can tell you where Canada falls short. I think we have to establish kind of where we need to be, and that we're getting better at telling Canada and Canadians what exactly we need to do to be ready for what's going on in the world. But the Canadian landscape is changing all the time, and in recent years, especially in response to a little shift in politics and lean forward in defense. There are a lot of capabilities that are being stood up, and especially in areas where the capital intensity is maybe not where you would see conventional warfare. So you've got in the areas of cyber, quantum, there were a lot of dual use capability in Canada that existed. We're really already world class, and now it's just a function of taking that world class capability and shifting some of its attentions to responding to the defense needs of our country. So that would be kind of my initial response to that question.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean, for that industry perspective. And next time you're on a panel, we'll have your headshot, of course. Chad, over to you. Let's love to hear from Reaction Dynamics.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Chad English. I'm the Senior Director of Government Programs, and I've got about 28 years now into the space and defense industry. And I've worked in government for 8 of those years too. So I'll give a little perspective from both sides of the table. Well, and so you're asking the question about capability gaps. One of the biggest things, and Sean mentioned this too, I think, is we're moving towards a dual use model. The big thing about dual use, although it's we get these terms that everybody's chasing. It was eco-friendly for everybody, eco-friendly in all the proposals. Now it's dual use on all the proposals. But legitimately, what we're trying to do is access the industrial base capabilities, including in academia. And in dual use, there's a unique perspective that separately defense and commercial industries don't tend to overlap on. You need to understand the defense needs. But you also need to understand the commercial technologies, and you need to be able to meet those two in the middle. The defense isn't looking to fund defense capabilities directly so that companies survive as defense contractors. They need to survive commercially, and being able to bridge that gap and understanding the economics of it, understanding how the business survives and how it can adapt towards those defense needs is important. So In academia, there's lots of academics that have worked on a lot of defense technologies. They understand the needs. A lot of commercial companies that have capabilities but don't understand the defense side. There's a key area there that I think academia can certainly help. Also, a lot of high risk areas, usually on the critical path. Try to do stuff inside companies. And in our case, to be specific, for example, we're a rocket launch company trying to build sovereign launch in Canada and responsive sovereign launch. And I believe that was mentioned earlier that that's moving quickly as one of the capabilities that DND is pushing on. And we have needs in propulsion and in avionics and materials and all those sorts of needs, but also what's the economics of, so for example, responsive launch. What if you can make a launch capability that can turn around in the order of days? Not only does that meet the defense needs, but it also opens up a new economic capability that isn't on the commercial markets right now. So those are the kinds of things that I think where we're going to see a lot of engagement with academia.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for sharing that. There's a whole menu of research questions in everything that you've chatted about. And of course, talent, I think, is going to be another critical piece. Wendy, you've already shared with us a lot of the dish, a lot of the priorities, but is there anything that you want to add on how you're viewing research partnerships, talent, and the program that we're looking at?
Yeah, exactly. So what I think is most exciting about it is that at its core, the defense industrial strategy really involves that orientation of the Canadian Armed Forces towards what industry and research talent has to offer, where the national defense is able to engage on what our needs are, and then what is available and what is in the hopper from a research and development perspective. So rather than industry anticipating what defense capability requirements are, what I really find exciting is that it's a shift from anticipating and avoiding having to potentially invest a significant amount of capital at the outset to having an opportunity to participate in those conversations about research, about development, about commercialization, and that it's grounded in defense requirements. And when we get to the dual use question, one of the things we really know is that industry can't survive or thrive on defense investment alone. Industry needs dual use technologies, and we need to have a strong export market internationally. And I know that we've got a number of companies that have leveraged MITEC's partnerships and MITEC's investment really for development in the civilian space, only to then realize that there's a specific defense application. And I know that's happened at D&D, and it's happened with the Coast Guard, and it's happened with others. And I was at a fantastic event in BC the other week with an AI company, and the founder spoke about how monitoring systems in support of fish conservation are now being leveraged for defense-specific purposes, leveraging visual language models. And the reverse is also true, which I think is great, that what is developed for defense can then be leveraged in the civilian context. And so that is, I think, one of the really exciting things about what this partnership has to offer, that it's connecting defense with what industry and what post-secondary institutions and our real talent have across the country to identify opportunities for information within the dual use context, with industry, with academia, with government and other partners, and what those needs are, where emerging trends in research and development are going, but to smooth out that pathway to commercialization. And that I think is where the opportunity for this partnership lies.
Fantastic. And that's just a great example of a dual use technology. So thank you for sharing that. Amina, I want to bring it back to you and dig a little deeper into how we can enable universities to engage more effectively in dual use defense and security research in the next 5 years as we look forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think many of my fellow panelists touched on some of these points. As I mentioned, one of our goals is to increase our collaboration and coordination across industry, CAF, government, and academia. And it's essential that we do that because universities can bring to bear a lot of the expertise that's required for some of the earlier stage developments. But what we really need to do is take those early stage innovations and make them into deployable technologies. My fellow panelists talked about dual use. We certainly at the University of Alberta focus on the technical aspects that have true military applications, but we have a breadth of expertise in the dual use space as well. And that covers everything from human factors to the well-being of the calf. And so it's really a great environment for us to draw on all that expertise. But we also believe that the collaborative ecosystem requires not just a push, but a pull approach, where it's actually the end users who are defining the problems that need to be solved, and then working very closely with us to make sure that the universities are aligning their projects with the industry needs, accelerating commercialization, and really working to strengthen Canada's sovereign capabilities across a whole host of fields. So we really see universities as partners. We see us as part of the ecosystem, but we all have a role in creating that ecosystem. So it's really essential, and I'm really pleased with this call because it's really trying to bring us together into that ecosystem. The other thing, and I know that DND is putting a lot of effort into this, which is greatly appreciated, is putting some thought into how we establish secure on-campus environments for defense and security research. And that's really critical because we do want to move into the classified space, and that requires facilities to do that. But if we're able to do that, it will remove a structural barrier, especially for small and medium-sized businesses and other industry partners. So limited access to these secure facilities is what often prevents us from scaling innovations. And it's also really important, as I mentioned, for us to have that forum for classified research. And whether it's the conversations, defining the problems, or actually testing what we're developing and bringing it to full scale is very critical. It also gives us an opportunity to train personnel, so highly qualified personnel, specifically for the defense and security sector. So these facilities would really bring us even closer together, ensuring that we can have the Canadian Armed Forces define the problems, but bringing everybody to the table to really have those conversations and look at how we can deploy these technologies in a way that's very effective for Canada. Thank you.
Well, it's fantastic comments, and I really appreciate thinking about how early stage IP and ideas get commercialized in partnership with the private sector and the type of environments that are being created. So, Sean, I'd love to get your thoughts on how collaboration with academia accelerates your research pipeline, and I'd love to hear your thoughts from the industry side.
Yeah, so we actually have a pretty strong history of collaborating very actively with public research institutions and post-secondaries. We see a tremendous amount of benefit, and we have for a long time, whether advancing lower TRL technologies that show promise and align well to where we are in our roadmap. So we tend to map things out several years out, whether it be because we see a government program or some commercial addressable market that's available to us if we can mature technologies and our offerings in a way that aligns with that. Sometimes we do those things in-house. A lot of the times we do, but a lot of the times it makes sense for us to take portions of those solutions and either marry them with technologies that are either further advanced or there's experts in post-secondaries, which is often the case. We're very fortunate in Canada. We have a very robust research network with experts that have deep expertise in areas that we do business in space and in areas that are emerging in Canada in AI and quantum. A lot of the people that you want to ask questions about in these areas tend to sit in universities. We have a number of, it's funny because I sent a note off to the team, asked them, hey, can you just give me a couple examples of work we're doing at the university? And there was a long list, so I won't go through the whole list, but I mean, we're doing things in virtual sensors. We're working on lunar rovers at the universities. We're working with university researchers to take our SAR imagery and train machine learning algorithms. Like there's a whole host of things that we do. Some of these, by the way, supported by MyTax. So thank you, MyTax. It is helping do a lot of stuff. So yeah, we've been really happy both in terms of the research output and how that helps further the progression of our solutions for D&D and other customers. But the other great win for us is that it developed a talent pool, not just in terms of their ability to understand the needs of the industry, but also how our business does work, and marrying some of these solutioning with a business case. Like the whole idea that you actually have to doing things, something like assessing the total addressable market for a product. right? These are things that people have to think about. Sometimes that doesn't go on in the lab, but when they start talking to our folks, that becomes part of the discussion. So all really valuable. We've had again, a tremendous amount of success and work with Canadian universities. We continue to do it. And we do like working with MyTax. We'll make that happen. So yeah, it's all been very good.
Thank you. That's some great examples. And I love hearing how you're connecting into incredible research expertise across the country, developing talent pools with a little help from MyTax. Chad, reaction dynamics. I'd love to hear your thoughts and some perhaps examples where you've worked with academia and sort of some of the motivations from reaction dynamics on connecting to universities and colleges across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And thanks for the good question. Sure. So, I mean, like Sean, we've worked with academia for quite a while. In fact, the IP that we have, we emerged out of Polytech in Montreal. So we've been working with a lot of universities on, let's say, technical areas like propulsion and fuels and materials, avionics, guidance and navigation. And that kind of work we'll call that as ongoing background work. But the question is asked specifically about accelerating, and there's some interesting areas, like some pull areas that are sort of in the future that we think, that I think at least, we need to get more connection in with academia that we don't know a lot of answers yet. So as I mentioned an example earlier of sort of the economics of responsive launch, there's another side to that, which is the defense in mission design and optimization and planning for these capabilities. And I'll get a little specific here. Responsive launch is not just the same as everybody else's launch capabilities. Sovereign launch, to launch satellites from Canada, that's part of it. But also built in the Launch the North program and in the CAF doctrine is responsiveness, responsive launch. And we've worked with Space Force in the States, with NATO Diana, in the NATO Starlift program, and in Canada, and they're looking for responsiveness. Being able to replenish a satellite within days or weeks that is disabled by an adversary. And that includes storability, mobility, being able to launch from just about anywhere, foreign countries, ships, in the middle of nowhere without infrastructure. And that's one of the capabilities that we have that a lot of the other rockets don't. And so that's one of the things we're pushing. But what do those missions look like? How do you order something up on the order of days? How do you prepare? Where do you place stockpiled rockets ready to be launched? And how do you mobilize all that? That isn't done yet. And so, like, understanding how those missions would be planned in the logistics involved. That's also part of, I think, a good area of study where an academic perspective, and these are like business and economics kind of academics, not the engineering side. And this is on top of, like Sean mentioned, business, and looking at the marketing side. So all of these areas, I think, are areas that we could accelerate on.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. We have an exciting agenda today, and we're going to get into the call for proposals. But before we do that, I always like to let my panelists have the last word. And the last question is going to go to you, Wendy, certainly as our key partner in this defense call. So maybe you could share, how does the DIS foresee innovation support programs like we're chatting about today translating into new pathways for new Canadian innovations?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I spoke about earlier is creating that space for conversation about defense needs and having it be grounded in conversations with post-secondary institutions about what's happening in research, what's happening with respect to development, and where are there opportunities for commercialization. We've had, for instance, we've had a number of roundtables already, so we hit the ground running once the strategy was released on medical countermeasures and on aerospace. These are going to continue, and they'll have representation certainly from post-secondary institutions and industry across the country, but really having that space for national defense to say, here are the things that we're worried about, or here are the things that we're interested in. That is one of the things that I think is critical. But more broadly, Defense Research and Development Canada recently launched the new procurement and operationalization of innovation and new technology pilot under the Innovation for Defense Excellence and Security program. And so that's one pathway, and facilitating the transition of those ideas, research and development opportunities into operational capabilities by the Canadian Armed Forces it's a pretty exciting thing. But I'd also like to note that we just established a new Science and Research Defense Advisory Council, and that's going to be co-chaired by D&D and the U-15, and that's also going to strengthen the collaboration and facilitate that open discussion with federal partners and post-secondary institutions on defense and dual-use research and development. And so that's really going to take a deep dive at those sovereign capabilities that we talked about, look at where are the opportunities with the U-15 and with industry by extension on how we can meet those going forward, grounded in research expertise that universities have. And I think that collaboration is critical. And I just would note that this really is a whole of society effort, and it involves federal partners, it involves the provinces and territories. Critically, it involves First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities and rights holders, and it involves industry. And it's really about developing that ecosystem oriented towards engaging on the needs of the CAF, and it involves the CAF engaging at the outset as well. So really making sure that industry and post-secondary institutions have the support that they need to help meet those needs together. I think that's the really exciting part.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that broad consultation process and really the broad engagement participation. So thank you for sharing all of that. With that, I absolutely want to thank all of the panelists here for sharing your insight, your thoughts, your leadership. So thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the importance of this new funding area for the country. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Amanda Rossi, who's going to walk us through the Defense and Security Accelerate Call for Proposals.
Thank you so much, Derek. I'm actually going to turn the mic to Simon Bousquet, our VP Business Development, who will go through the call for proposal details.
Indeed. Hello, everyone. We can go to the next slide and I'll start walking through the details of this call, which might help answer some of the questions we saw in the Q&A section of Teams. So first, why this call exists. Derek mentioned some of the few points, but Canada is investing in sovereign defense innovation. There's a need for dual use innovation. There are the DIS priorities that we'll focus on. There's a need for talent and commercialization, and the non-deniable importance of Canadian industrial capabilities. So that's at the center of what we want to support through this call for proposal. Next slide. We'll support through this call, like I mentioned, dual use technologies, obviously, projects that are directly aligned with the defense industrial strategy, those key sectors of sovereign capabilities that were identified. We expect these projects will be applied research and development projects done in partnership with partner organizations. Workforce development is at the center of this because these calls will involve students, post-secondary students, and postdocs. We expect some commercialization pathways to be created through the call and helping with sovereign Canadian capabilities, of course. On the next slide, we go over some of the details of these eligible focus areas. Divided in three categories here. So under defense and security platforms, projects in aerospace, space, and uncrewed systems, so autonomous vehicles, drones, etc. Under the enabling technologies category, digital systems, AI and cyber, for example, sensors, specialized manufacturing, quantum sciences and technology, which technically can be part of the digital systems, but we singled it out because it's definitely a sector of interest for Canada and for MITACs. And under operations, capability and sovereignty, in-service support, personal protection, training and simulation, and Arctic sovereignty is something we added. So projects will have to qualify for at least one of these focus areas. And there's a section in the proposal where applicants have to provide the justification, build a business case as to why their project applies to one of these areas. Next slide, please. Here we have the funding structure and a little bit of details on how projects, what we'll accept in terms of project submissions. So those of you familiar with the model, the Accelerate program is used in this case here, and it works in internship units, where each internship unit is a 4 to 6 months work segment for an intern. So we'll accept proposals of up to 30 internship units per project. Project should have a duration of 2 years in length maximum. We'll expect at least 50% of internship units to be named, to have a student named on the project, which leaves the other 50% for what we call TBD students. So at the time of submissions, not all students have to have been identified, which gives flexibility to researchers and companies to recruit students at a later time. What's special about this call is higher award values. For masters and PhDs, we'll give access to $20,000 per unit, provided a $10,000 contribution from the partner, which will provide at least $15,000, if not the whole $20,000 per unit for the stipend of the interns. At the postdoc level, we give access to a $25,000 unit value, minimum 20K for a stipend, and again, half of it comes from a contribution from the partner organization. We lost the slides. I don't know if Amanda. Oh, there you go. Thank you. So masters, PhDs, and postdocs have access to a higher award values. That being said, any other level of students, from college, polytechnics level students, undergrads, recent grads, still have access to the program. They remain eligible for the call for proposal. They just have access to the regular funding model, up to $15,000 per unit, but they remain totally eligible to apply to this call. And so are these institutions as well, obviously. On the next slide, please. So who should apply? So ideal applicants will include those defense companies, dual-use technology companies, or companies that aspire to become a dual-use technology company. SMEs that are scaling their innovation roadmap, obviously academic researchers, interns, students, postdocs, applied R&D teams, and organizations seeking commercialization support in the defense and security sector. We list a few what we call strong fit indicators. So anyone with an existing prototype, or they want to improve an existing prototype or advance on their TRL scale for their project, people with a need for research expertise, people with talent pipeline needs, AI, sensing, autonomy, advanced manufacturing focus. A lot of our projects we assume will fall in these categories. It's not limited to, but we expect that a lot of projects will be received in these categories or sectors. And obviously, we'll be looking for a very strong alignment with the Canadian Defence Industrial Strategy. This is what will differentiate this call from the normal program that we operate year-round. Next slide. And here you have the call timeline. So we opened the call, I want to say 2.5 weeks ago. So it's been open for 2 weeks now. The deadline to apply is August 17th. We will conduct we have our adjudication process. So there will be a competitive review and selection of projects that will happen during the fall. We expect funding award decisions to be communicated late in 2026, so late fall. And projects can technically start as soon as these funding award decisions have been communicated. We expect a lot of them to start either very late in 2026 or early in 2027. People interested in learning more about the call can contact a MyTax advisor. If you Google MyTax advisor, you'll find our page, and you'll find someone very close to you across Canada. We have staff coast to coast. Next slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for providing us the overview of the call for proposals. We've taken up some of the questions from the chat. I'll keep you here on the screen, and I'll read them out for responses. So, first question: is MyTax undertaking any additional steps for research security review for application in areas advancing STRA, presumably most applications of the defense call?
Yeah, so STRA being the sensitive technology research and affiliations. So yes, MyTax, we've always had a research security guidelines, and this defense call doesn't change that. So the applications received under this call will be reviewed in accordance with relevant federal research security requirements, including the National Security Guidelines for Research Partnerships and the Policy on Sensitive Technology Research and Affiliations of Concern, where applicable. Research security considerations form part of the overall assessment process alongside scientific merit, feasibility, impact, and alignment with the defense industrial strategy. And we assume that each institution will also have their own research security process internal to their institution, and for applications to follow all institutional guidelines as well.
Thank you very much. Our next question is, if an academic has an idea for a defense or dual use project, how will MyTax and the MOD help to find MOD and industry partners who might be interested? Or will we be required to find our own for this call if there was some sort of matchmaking service that would be greatly helpful, like we do in Accelerate?
Yes. So someone would have to explain to me what MOD is. I'm not familiar with that acronym, but I think I understand the question relatively well, even without that definition. So it's true that MyTax, we have advisors coast to coast that understand really well what academia does, and we speak with companies across the country on a daily basis. In the case where a company has an idea and what they're looking for is academic expertise, we can quite easily try and find them the right expertise, the right researcher, and then they can identify students in that researcher's group. So we have a process for this. So companies should not hesitate to contact MyTax, and we can help them find proper research expertise in the academic ecosystem. The other way around is indeed more difficult for us. We have a good idea of what the defense and security ecosystem is on the industry side. However, we don't have a very granular knowledge of who does what necessarily, or the exact project of interest for each company. However, if a prof has an idea, what we would welcome them to do is to identify maybe 1, 2, 3 companies that they would like to work with. And we can definitely facilitate introductions, because chances are we've worked with these companies before. And if that's the case, we'll happily facilitate introductions and try to facilitate a partnership.
Wonderful, thank you. We had a response in the Q&A chat that MOD is Ministry of Defense and is a British term. So there we go. Next question: would any projects that intersect with health research be eligible for this opportunity? I'm okay to take this one if you want. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Health projects are accepted. However, they need to map onto the defense industrial strategy priority sectors. So that doesn't change. So we're not excluding any discipline. Health sciences, social sciences, humanities, obviously STEM disciplines. which might feel more natural, but we're not excluding anything. However, like I said, in the proposal, there's a section where applicants will have to justify why their project falls onto those priority sectors. And adjudication will take that business case into account for the funding decision.
Thank you, Simon. We'll move on to the next one. Is this call available only to graduate level university students? Is it open to colleges and polytechnic students?
Right. So what's special with this call? The Accelerate program is open year-round. Anyone can apply to this, including projects in the defense and security sector. So that doesn't change. What changed for this call is the provision of higher award values, which is for now limited to those more senior students. So masters, PhDs, and postdocs at the 20K and 25K level. However, students of all degrees, post-secondary and recent grads remain eligible to apply to the call. Institutions, colleges, polytechnics, universities are all eligible to apply to the call, and will fund projects with all these level of institution. The only difference is the availability of the higher award values that are limited to the more senior students and postdocs.
Thanks again, Simon. So next question, for highly specialized next generation network infrastructures, which sits between advanced digital systems and national security, does MyTax or D&D have a pre-vetted list of defense contractors or telecom partners actively looking to collaborate on secure routing and data sovereignty?
That's a good question. So I cannot speak on behalf of D&D. I don't know if D&D has a list of vetted partners. I would say that MyTax, we don't necessarily have vetted partners. We have a list of partners we worked with in the past. So similar to the question we had before, if a professor or a research institute would like to collaborate with, they have a company in mind, reach out to us and we'll be happy to facilitate introductions. But we don't have kind of a list of partners that are ready to go and are just waiting for us to knock at their door. But we can definitely help make those connections.
So thank you. Yes, that's what MyTax is best known for, right? Making those connections. Next question, how can we smaller post-secondary institutions outside the U15 research groups improve our ability to attract industry collaborators? Is there a bias to invest more in recognized names?
That's a good question. I think there's definitely for those larger institutions, the ones that are known, there might be a bias on the industry side because it's a name that they've seen before. That being said, I like to think that Canada's post-secondary ecosystem is very strong, and we I don't think we have an Ivy League where the quality is that much better, and then we have second tier and third tier institutions. So I think academic research is very strong even in smaller institutions outside of big urban centers. It's a matter of having these the expertise in these smaller institutions known by industry. So again, if a company shows interest in our program and is looking for a specific set of skills or expertise, we usually tend to promote these projects across the board in all institutions, regardless of their size or location. So it's up to these institutions to take advantage of that offer. They can obviously do their own business development efforts and go out there and secure their own partners. And again, we'll be happy to facilitate connections whenever we can for these smaller institutions.
Thanks, Simon. I'll also just add or emphasize rather that the applications are evaluated based on their merit, including quality, feasibility, impact, alignment with the call objectives. So, within smaller institutions, we often see that there is unique or very specialized expertise and strong regional partnerships. So, of course, that can always make everyone highly competitive. So, definitely room for all to be applying and funded within the call within those parameters.
I'll throw in an industry. So from an industry standpoint, I'll second what Sima had mentioned that oftentimes the discussions when they go on our end in terms of projects and who we want to partner with, we don't really talk about the size of the institution. It's really a function of the experts they have in house. It's usually there are a couple people that are world renowned for something, and it's either someone studied with somebody or somebody has issued a paper and it's drawn interest. So it really is based off of the expertise you have in house. It's not necessarily a function of the dynamics of the institution.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much, Sean, for those insights. So I think you've addressed this next question, but we'll see, Simon, if you have anything you'd like to add. Will this call follow the traditional MyTax format, or will there be a list of companies and projects that applicants can browse and apply to?
No, it follows the same process if you're used to the program. So what we need for an application is for the at least the professor and the company partner organization to be known at the time of submission. At least half of the students also have to be known. Half the units have to have a student name to them, but it's not limited to a subset of companies or a subset of profs. It's new professors who have never interacted with MyTax before are welcome. Same thing for companies that have never used our program. So it's the same program that people know, except projects have to fall within the defense and security sector. Explain the strong benefit to Canada, why this project needs to be supported, and align with the DIS.
Thanks very much. Okay, next question. Is it possible for an application to cover more than one field, for instance, sensor and manufacturing technology?
Yes, the answer is yes. However, on the proposal, I think we'll ask you to identify probably the main focus area. And in that section for that justification, you can mention more and provide arguments as to why your project falls into more than one category. So that's not a problem, but for our reporting purposes, I think we'll be asking you to identify the main focus area your project applies to.
Okay, great. Thank you, Simon. I'm just scrolling here to see which questions we might have missed. Okay, this one here just coming in. For polytechnics, would we still need to apply by August 17th? Or are we applying to the standard Accelerate program?
So in the case where applicants are not requesting IUs at the higher award, then if you're only requesting standard award values, you can apply outside of the call, so the deadline would not apply to you. It's only if you require those 20K and 25K units that this is limited, so the deadline applies to these applications.
Okay, and a follow-up on that question, which I'm going to just reframe a little bit, or combine two questions, is the funding, funding partners need to be defined at the start, or would this be similar to the umbrella program? And then combining that with, is this call also open for joint NSERC Alliance and Accelerate applications?
Right, so the partner organizations have to be named at the time of submission. We need their financial commitment to the project. So it's not just an academic project where a partner will be found later. It needs to answer a need for both an academic need and the industry need. So we need that partner organization named up front. For this call for proposal, we will not allow a joint application with NSERC simply because we have a deadline of August 17th and the NSERC process is not compatible with this. And because there's already higher award values, we're keeping this initiative as a standalone one and not offered with joint applications with other groups.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Simon. We hope that you've had a lot of answers to your questions about the call for proposals. I'll just remind everyone to please feel free to reach out to your MyTax Business Development Advisor if you do have additional questions. The team is here to support. Thank you again to everyone who's participated today. A very warm, special thank you to our panelists for joining us. It's been an honor to have you all here and participate in this discussion. And again, thank you to D&D for your precious collaboration in this initiative. We're really looking forward to helping people develop their projects and seeing through the call period and fund these exciting projects. With that, we'll end the webinar here. And again, thank you all for your participation and your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.